You are listening to The Black Landscape with Andrea Spearman, where Black excellence is always trending. Welcome back. I'm your host, Andrea Spearman, and this is The Black Landscape, where we engage with emerging and established Black leaders here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm Andrea Spearman. I'm a light-skinned Black woman with my dark brown curly hair, currently in Bantu knots. I'm wearing pastel pink glasses and a dusty pink sweatshirt that I was gifted from all-female hip-hop dance company Mixed Ingredients. And it reads in white letters, "The future is female." Today we're here with David Mack. Return of the Mack. Come on, return of the Mack. Oh. David, describe yourself to our listeners.
I love it. Thank you. Happy to be here. I'm David Mack. My pronouns are he, him. I am a Black man with short hair. I'm wearing a black headset and a black tank top. And happy to be here.
Yes. So David's pretty new to the Bay Area, but he's already making moves and planting his feet. So tell us about your background. Where are you originally from?
Yes, well, I was born and raised in Far Rockaway, Queens, New York, before it was nice.
New York.
And yep, Far Rock. And my parents moved us when I was very little to Connecticut. So I grew up in Connecticut and then went to undergrad in upstate New York and then came out as soon as I could to Los Angeles for grad school. So that's what brought me over here to the West Coast.
Awesome. And what was your family life like? Because you're of Caribbean descent, right?
Yes, my mom is Jamaican, so I'm second generation. I'm Jamaican American. And my family, a lot of Jamaican relatives would come and visit, both when I was in New York and in Connecticut. And almost every summer when I was little, we would go to the island, to the motherland of Jamaica.
Yes.
And so it influenced me. It influenced how I saw this country, how I saw my place in the world. My father was born and raised in Jersey City, New Jersey, and my family roots from his side go back to, I believe, South Carolina. I'd have to ask to look it up along the generations. So I had both the African American influence and the Jamaican influence at the family home. There was a lot of singing at the home,
Of course.
a lot of a lot of dancing, a lot of singing, a lot of great food. I still to this day love ackee salt fish and
Yes.
kalaloo and jerk, anything spicy.
Yes.
And sorrel and anything with rum because had that all the time. It was all rum in rum cake, rum everything. So that was a lot of fun to absorb. But also there was a lot of fun conflict. Well, now looking back on it, it sounds fun. At the time, it was just conflict. But now looking back, I remember sometimes there would be a fight going on and someone in the family would break out in song to respond to the argument of whoever was arguing. I remember one time at the kitchen table, my mother was like, "Dear Lord, deliver me from this place, deliver me from these people." And I was like, okay. So it was like a musical in the house.
I
And
love
I
it.
was pretty much the introverted one. Me, my little brother, my sister, we were pretty introverted. Our idea of fun was playing chess or board games or reading a book. And so the fact that my mother is so extroverted, along with so many of the Jamaican members of my family that would come over, it was a fun environment to be around. And I think prepared me very, very well for a life in the arts here in California. My dad, I think I absorbed a lot of my dad's personality. He was more reserved and he was really a rock of the family, a union guy, worked at the rail station for years. Yeah, he was at the Metro North, for those of y'all that know New England and Northeast. You got the Metro North train, goes from New York up through New England, and he was a station master for years. And my mother also worked on the train before she ended up being a domestic engineer, she calls it, nanny for wealthy people.
Mm-hmm.
One fun anecdote is she was a nanny for Harvey Weinstein's mother.
Oh, wow.
So, there are stories there in
Whoa.
the house. That was pre Me Too. And other fun, wealthy people in New England. So that also had an influence being around a lot of wealth, around people with generational wealth. I was, we didn't have wealth, but I was fortunate to receive a scholarship to go to private school in Connecticut called Greens Farms Academy. And I was one of the few of us melanated peeps in the world of Greens Farms Academy, GFA as they called it. And it very much influenced also how I saw my place, how I was treated in the world, being around so much privilege and being around so much freedom. I will say people who really the world was their oyster
Mm-hmm.
and their future was what they wanted to envision it. They had no ceiling, no glass ceilings, no walls,
Mm.
no barriers, seemingly in their
Isn't that
lives.
nice?
Yeah, and it was
How
really
nice.
to look at that, yeah, and to see, wow, they're they really think the whole world is like Westport, Connecticut, which is where we were. Oh, another fun anecdote: the school was five 5 minutes, so like less than 5 miles away from Martha Stewart's house when
Oh.
she was over in Westport, and no one in the neighborhood liked her because she would bring in plants. She had a garden. I just heard this story that she had a garden and she was bringing in invasive species into her garden, which would just spill over into other people's lawns and other
Oh
people's
no.
yards and just disrupt the entire ecosystem of the
So
neighborhood.
she's always been a troublemaker, is what you're saying.
They were not a fan. Well, there was a time where America loved her at that time. I grew up
Mm.
in the '90s, but
Not those neighbors.
they were not they were not a fan. The town was not a fan for what I heard. So yeah, I just have fun stories of that. I mean, the Bushes lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, 15 minutes away from us. My little sister went to a boarding school, the same boarding school that the Kennedys went to, Choate. So we were surrounded by privilege. But when you're surrounded by privilege and you don't have privilege, and you are the child of an immigrant from a country and a Commonwealth country, right? Because Jamaica is part of the Commonwealth. So the Queen, it was a colony, British colony, and then it was a Commonwealth of the Queen before it got its independence in the late 50s, and it's still considered a Commonwealth country. And everyone's experience is different, but for me, a lot of what I was learning and hearing was be very grateful that you're in this country. The world is a very rough place, and you are in a privileged position, and make the most of it. But don't trust these people. These people will smile with you and they will say, "Oh, we love you and we're so happy you're here. We're so happy to have the first black this and the first black that." But
Hmm.
as soon as but when times get tough and if resources get scarce and if they have to choose, you're not going to be the one chosen. All the love is going to be forgotten. And
Hmm.
so it's been an interesting journey going from that type of an environment to California, which is very, very different culturally. And
Oh
also,
yeah.
the generation now being older and seeing the young generation coming up, so very different dynamics, very different issues, and it's fascinating. And so I'm just really excited to be here on the West Coast, where for me, I feel a lot of freedom here. I feel like the world is an oyster here. And I feel like, even though, of course, we have challenges and barriers, I feel like I can define and then redefine and redefine myself
Yes.
here as I'm exploring what my destiny and destinies are and how I can serve my fellow artists. So I love being here and I don't want to ever go back, and I don't plan on ever going back, but you never say never. Maybe I will see me back in New England one day. But for now, really happy here in Oakland, which is where I'm hanging out these days.
Yes, you're very welcome.
Oh, actually, I'll give you one more if that's
Okay.
cool. The
Yeah.
some of you, some people may have seen this. I thought it was a really great show on. I think it was on Hulu, called Dope Sick, which
Mhm.
was about the opioid epidemic. And
Yes.
I watched it, and in some of the scenes, they have the Sackler family is there, and the one of the matriarchs of the Sackler family gets played. I don't remember the name of the actor, but the Sacklers, their kids went to my school. They went to Greens Farms Academy.
What?
And
Wow.
so, and I think I'd have to ask my little sisters and brothers. It was after my time, after I left, but I think some of them were in the same grades as one of my sisters or brother. And so it was so, and I remember I saw them occasionally, and they were beloved in the school at the time, and it's just
At the
so
time.
funny. And so, yeah, this was back in the day. This was actually, well, actually, this was while apparently their company was destroying this country and ruining so many people's lives. And it
Mhm.
is just so surreal to remember that, and to now see this show, and then, of course, to hear in the news all of the mayhem that they've caused and the attempt to find accountability. But what I've really learned so much from my experience with some of these privileged cultures, these privileged families, and these privileged communities is, when you come from generational wealth, it is, you are just so set. I mean, the idea of going into poverty is so foreign a concept. It's like you can
Right.
go bankruptcy, lawsuits, prison. You're gonna stay rich. You stay paid. Like, it's just, no. You could suck out no matter how many money you suck out. There's always just so much more. And it's just
Mhm.
generation. It's just the wealth just oozes out of the veins. It really becomes like a part of the identity of the community members. So it's just like, it's such a different world from my world, but still, it is very fun just to see people that you remember from your school life on television, infamous.
Indeed. Yeah, so let's circle back to, your home life, and you said, there was always music, there was always lively conversation, there was movement. So it seems like you were built for the artist life.
Oh yeah, when I went to undergrad in upstate New York, I knew that I wanted to be in the arts. I was a theater major, and then when I came out to LA, I went to Cal Arts and got my MFA there. And I took as many producing classes as I could, because I knew that I wanted to be involved behind the scenes, and I
Mm.
was looking for where my voice could be useful. And I looked first at the stage managers, production managers, directors. I did some directing and stage management while I was there, and of course, performing. And as I became more exposed to some of the cultural movements that were happening at the time, this was early 2000s, or I'd say early to mid 2000s, and we were reading like Susan Laurie Parks and a lot of solo performance artists in the API community, in the Black community, and in the Latinx community and others. And I was never exposed to that growing up in Connecticut. And
Of course
so
not.
I, which is fascinating because we had I had access. We had access to every resource. It was a beautiful school.
Mhm.
It was a great education, but it was such a bubble. When I realized how ignorant I really was and how little I'd been exposed to, I was like, "What's the point of all this wealth if they didn't teach me anything about American
Hello.
culture?"
Right.
So,
Access is not education.
right, exactly. Yes, very true. And even an education, the definition of education was off because I was
Mm.
getting an excellent quote unquote education, but I wasn't really learning about the real world, in my opinion. And so I was very grateful that I got exposed to a lot of playwrights, a lot of performers that were doing really great work and pushing boundaries. And I said, okay, there's voices that I've been wanting to see expressed, people that I've been wanting to see on the stage that I just never were aware of. And so they're doing their thing. How can I support that? Where am I not seeing myself? Where am I not seeing people like me with my values, people with my background, and other marginalized people that deserve a voice but that are not being seen or heard? And so then and then I started to look a little deeper, and I said, okay, so there's these productions happening. Well, who's making these productions? Okay, directors, who's hiring these directors? Oh, companies. Okay, who's working at these companies? So then I started to look at theater companies, and I was looking at the demographics there, and I said, okay, I'm not seeing a lot of people like me. And I said, well, let me go farther. And then I started looking at boards, and I really wasn't seeing people like me. And then I started saying, okay, how are these boards producing these shows? How are they functioning? Who is their boss? And then I started looking at funders and membership organizations and affinity groups and national organizations and advocacy organizations. And then I said, I see what's going on. Okay, this is where I am needed. This is where
Yes.
the system needs to be fixed in order to support the people on the ground, the real people who are
Mhm.
struggling to survive and create their art and have a voice in this world. And so that moment I knew, and so this was by the time I mean, very quickly in CalArts, after my first year, I knew that I wanted to be involved in supporting the infrastructure of arts. And so at the time, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what the positions were or what they did.
Mhm.
And by the time I graduated, I said, well, you know what? Let me just go out into the world and see if something falls on into my lap. And of course, I graduated in 2008, which was the beginning of the last, what do we want to call it? The last Great Recession. Some of y'all may remember. And that was tough. And after I graduated, I struggled for a year, like so many of my classmates and many of all of us in that generation. There were months I didn't know how I was going to pay rent. I was couch surfing. I was subletting.
Struggle
There were
City.
days, yeah, I didn't know where the next meal was going to come from. But I look back on it, and I was having fun. I was young, and I was running around LA and just
Oh
day to
yeah, you
day,
have the
just trying
best
to make
times
it
when you're
work.
broke.
Yeah, exactly. You're so right.
Them be the best times.
This is
But
so
making
right.
things work.
I was like, I look back, I'm like, how did I survive? And actually, now I couldn't have survived. I could do, of course, we could have a whole conversation about our housing crisis in this country and in California and where we live and
Mhm.
how hard it is coming out of school now. I don't know how students are doing it. We were barely able to do it then, and the prices were much more affordable than they are now, relatively. So I don't know how you did, but you survive, you make it work, and so I
Mhm.
survived and made it work. And I happened to be at a party, a little cocktail party, because I knew I needed to keep networking, needed to keep engaging with my community. And so I was at a cocktail party, and I happened to run into one of my mentors, Leslie Tamarabuchi, who was the chair of the board of Cornerstone Theater Company at the time, a wonderful social justice themed theater company based in LA. And she was also the head of, I believe, engagement and finance at CalArts at the time. It was really a mentor for me. And she came up to me and said, how are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm great. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just running around trying to find a job. She said, well, they're looking for a managing director at Watts Village Theater Company in Watts. And I was like, great. Now, I didn't even know what a managing director did at that time, and I didn't really know where Watts was. But I said, oh,
Mm.
it's a job, and it says director. And so she said, you should apply. And I said, okay, but are you sure I'm qualified? I haven't been a managing director before. And she said, well, just throw your hat in the ring, see what happens. So I put together a resume as best I
Yes.
could.
I
And
If I can hold you right there. She said, toss your hat in the ring anyway.
oh, yeah,
I want listeners, do you hear that? Toss your hat in the ring anyway, even if you think it's beyond you, even if you don't know what you're doing. That's a word of wisdom right there.
it was the best advice that I got probably ever, but definitely at that time. Although, as I keep telling this story, you all might say this is more of a warning, a warning than an advice. But I applied, and I interviewed multiple rounds of interviews and tried to express my passion as best I could. And for whatever reason, lo and behold, I got a call from the chair of the board, I believe, at the time, was also the co-founder of the company, Lynn Manning. Amazing, blind African American playwright
Mm.
and performer and legendary in Los Angeles. And he called me and said, congratulations, you got the job. And I was so
Hey.
excited. I was in my little apartment and I was jumping up and down. And I was like, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. And then he said, okay, well, don't get too excited because that's the good news is you got the job. The bad news
Oh.
is we don't have enough money to pay you more than
Oh.
a little bit of a stipend because this is a very, 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 very grassroots company. So we can't actually give you a salary or any type of living wage or any type of real wage.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, that's fine. That's fine. Because in my head, I was thinking, I can turn this into a wage. And at that time, I had no idea how I would do that. But I was like, I have a job in the arts. I will,
Mm-hmm.
like the Jamaican kicked in, and I was like, I will turn this into something.
Right.
And and the story was I ended up there with Guillermo Aviles Rodriguez, my artistic director at the time. We were a dynamic duo team, and I hustled. Worked many hours on the job, trial by fire, training, trial and error, all the things you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Learn what a managing director did, what an arts administrator was. I went to every networking event, every professional development event I could find. I read every online article I could find and made many, many, many mistakes and worked there for 4 years. But by year 4, I had done it. I had fundraised my own salary.
There you go.
And I learned how to build a board. So I built and developed a board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
I learned how to fund, recruit, hire, and then manage staff people. I learned how to produce theater. And we were doing this during a recession in South LA. And so I'm so grateful that that was my first job because after that, I really became fearless. I didn't stress too much about challenges when
Mm.
it came to funding or sustainability because all I had to say to myself was, you ran a theater company in a recession in South LA in a place where most people in that city were afraid to even go, much less fund and support. And so if you can do that, you're going to be fine. And so
Absolutely.
that really did served me well. The other thing I'm really grateful for is that Lynn was my first board chair and eventually became artistic director. And working with a blind director was an amazing experience. He could do more than what most people who could see do. And I worked with him every day for years, and would drive him around and go out to restaurants with him and go out to plays and meetings and see him in action. And he really, this is euphemism, but he opened my eyes. He really helped me become more aware of the fact that theater and the arts in general is, and it's going to come across as a cliche, but it is really, it can be and should be and is for everyone, even people that you might not think that it's for. And also, if you create a work with people in mind, or even beyond with people in mind, centering a different perspective, it actually really makes the work more exciting for everyone involved. And so when I was creating work with him, we were creating it from the perspective of someone who's blind, right? And we were doing site specific work at that time. So we weren't just doing work in the theater. We were going out to trains, and we were doing shows on train stations, and then we
Oh,
go out to
wow.
parks. We do shows in parks and in parking lots and in restaurants and all these different places. And yeah, just to see how he worked and how respected he was
Mm.
and how effective he was really made me appreciate what the arts can do, what the arts should be about. And that has served me very well. So I'm grateful for those two things. That's my experience. No shade on anyone who starts off working at, in Los Angeles, say like the Music Center, or here you say YBCA. That's lovely as well. But for me,
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciated starting on the streets of Wise, where I would go and I was fine. Not to glamorize the community. It was beautiful, but of course it's got its it had its problems. It still has its problems
Mm-hmm.
at the time. And now it's a mostly Latinx community. A lot of people associate
Mm.
it as Black community, but that's because the history and the roots. But it is, at the time, it was over 80% Latinx. Compton also, I don't know the demographics now, but at the time, Compton was over 50% Latinx as well, and a lot of people didn't know. And
No.
so, yeah, for me, it was about the Black and Brown community. I was learning a lot about. I'd known nothing about the Chicano movement growing up. I knew nothing about immigration to any real extent, beyond my own family's stories. And so I was exposed to a lot of that working in South LA, especially building and designing arts education programs with the schools there. It was very eye opening. And so, yeah, I'm so really grateful that that's where I started. That served me well in my career.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you for sharing that in-depth look at the beginnings of your theater career. And it's so incredibly wonderful for you to have that knowledge of, I want to be behind the scenes. I want to be producing so early in your career, because usually in my experience, at least here in the Bay Area, I've seen people who went from being on stage and then kind of moving into the stage manager, producing, writing, being more on the back side of it, on the producing side. So it's very interesting, and to me, that you knew so early, so young, where you wanted to be.
Yeah, and one thing I'm really grateful for is that I did do a lot of performing when I was in school, and I
Mhm.
also dabbled in commercial. If you do a Google or YouTube search, you'll see a ridiculous Staples commercial that I did, where I was getting smacked around with a ruler and hit with staples. It was
Oh
actually funny.
no.
And I did some indie films. I'm in like 2 or 3 films. I can't even remember. You have to just look it up on IMDb. So I did that early on,
Mhm.
while I was at Cal Arts, and after I graduated. And I'm really grateful that I did that, because it made me appreciate what
Mhm.
artists go through to create their art as a producer. It really surprised me how many producers and executive directors and administrators there are, because you do mention the kind of stereotype is that they're performers who are retiring or going to a different part of their career, arts administrators. But I think with our generation coming up, there's a lot of career arts administrators, which I think is wonderful. But there are a lot of people that have never auditioned for anything in their life, or they've never been had to go through a rehearsal process. And I'm like, you should really have to go through that, because then you can have some empathy for your artists who are then going through that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I heard so many producers be like, "Oh my gosh, these artists are so crazy. Why are they acting like this?" Well,
You would know if you
yeah, yeah,
right
exactly.
had ever auditioned for anything. It's stressful.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, then do they know? Why do they only need the green M&Ms? It's like, because that's what calms them before they go on
Right. That's what
stage.
make that's what calms my nervous system so I can get into this role or I can go on stage or what have you.
Exactly. So yeah, so it's been a really joyful experience, and I'm glad that I had that chapter of my life. But yes, no, I am a career arts administrator all the way, for sure.
Awesome. So right now we're going to take a short break to catch up on previous episodes of The Black Landscape. Download on Apple Podcasts, Buzzsprout, and Google Podcasts. And hey, now we're on Amazon Music as well. We are back with innovator David Mack. David, what is the artist magnet and how did it begin?
Well, the artist magnet is a concept that started while I was actually at CalArts. So it's been bouncing in my head for a while. I was with a bunch of colleagues, and we were a bunch of actors talking around a table, expressing our frustration around having to design a resume on Word at the time, Microsoft Word, and printing it out and cutting it and stapling it to a headshot and bringing it into a casting director for an audition where odds are you're not going to get the role. And then they just put it in a drawer somewhere and forget about it. And you're spending all these resources and all this time putting something together that people aren't really looking at. Even when they're looking at it,
Mm-hmm.
they don't even really care what your credits are, what you're doing. And we were like, oh gosh, it would be so much easier if we just had some type of an online system where we could just do this and where it would just format it for us. And we wouldn't even have to go through the whole rigmarole of designing it ourselves. And then later, as I became a manager and then producer and then an executive director, I was always being asked by either my artistic director or colleagues, can you find me a stage manager? Can you find me a lighting designer? Can you find me a film director? Can you find me a dancer, singer, musician, whatever was needed? Because I think probably for a while, but definitely in the past decade, 10, 15 years, a lot of the walls between the métiers, as they say, between the fields of dance, theater,
Mm-hmm.
film, music have been coming down and breaking down. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of choreographers want to work with fabricators and want composers in their work, and theater directors want filmmakers documenting or projecting art in their work, and people really want to collaborate with each other, which I think is really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the network that I built, CalArts being a place where all those different disciplines were in the same building, served me really well. While I was there, I took, in addition to trying to take as many producing classes, I took music classes, dance classes, film classes, and became friends with a lot of my classmates in those different classes and continued those relationships after I graduated. And so I fortunately had a network to reach out to if my artistic director would ask me to find someone, but not all the time. Sometimes I would have to like go on Facebook or go on IMDb or call someone, be like, "Do you know somebody?" or do a posting. And I just kept saying to myself, "Oh my gosh, it would be so great if I could just go to one place, one website where I could just put in a database, what I'm looking for. Like I'm looking for a stage manager in this city with this experience and doing this, who's worked with these shows. And then I just click one button and all of the people who fit that criteria, their resumes would just show up. And I could scan through their resumes and I could actually see where they've worked and what they've worked on, and then click through that and see who they've worked with,
Mm-hmm.
see if there's a 6 degrees of separation connection to them. And if I know someone who knows them, which would be really great, or maybe I could discover someone new that they've worked with, or I could get additional people on the project. And so I kept talking about this after I graduated over the years through my career. And one day, one of my friends, her name's Tatiana Williams, shout out, she's a wonderful actor, and she said, "Stop complaining about it and just make it yourself." And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'm going to make a website that does all this stuff that I'm talking about." And I don't really know then how it happened. Is a couple of years later, I ended up with a web developer, a web designer, a board of directors, and a website. And it's artistmagnet.com. And so we built a site where
Mm-hmm.
artists and production members can build their resume. So the central aspect of the Artist Magnet network is a professional resume builder that builds the resume for you so you don't have to design it yourself. But then as you're building your resume, your credits are hyperlinked so that you can create production and venue pages and company pages. And so then you can create a page, like for example, a company page that has all the different productions that's happened in that company. Then you click on those productions and you can see all the people that have worked on those productions who have built resumes on the site. So it's organic. It's not like a database of someone, some random person or stranger putting in the information. It is organically the people that are involved are putting in and then ideally maintaining and keeping fresh their resumes in the system so that you can see up to date
Mm-hmm.
information about what they're working
Yes.
on or what they have worked on. You can kind of do that 6 degrees of separation and go through the flow of the productions that they've worked on, see if there's matches to what you've worked on. And so, yeah, it's like LinkedIn. The idea is LinkedIn, but with the look and feel of an artist resume. So it's like for our community, because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of us end up using LinkedIn or Facebook. So the idea is like, yeah, why don't we have something for ourselves? And a big part of the concept was that it would be free for artists to build their resume and make those links and connections, and that
Mm-hmm.
the production companies and the theater companies would pay a monthly fee to get access to that information, which is a model that I see starting to emerge with a lot of projects, especially with the younger generation, that I'm grateful for. In my time back in the day coming out of CalArts, it was very much a model of artists were expected to pay a lot of
Mm-hmm.
money. To a large extent, still really are. At commercial and also in our arts and cultural world. In the commercial world, it's just artists are expected to pay a lot of money to
Which is
put their stuff
ridiculous.
on LA Casting, Actors Access. So up here where we are in the Bay Area, it's expected for artists, actors, and even dancers to just fly, on their own expense, fly to LA, or from LA, fly up here to audition for these things. And they don't get access to all the information of all the people involved in the project. All they get access to is like, here's your sides, here's what we want you to do, here's what you're doing, and we want all of your information. But the people behind the scenes, the people producing, the people that are funding, they get access to everybody's information, and they get it for free, or they get paid for the privilege of deciding if they're going to offer you a job. And
Mm-hmm.
so I said, it really should be flipped on its head, because generally the people in that position, the position of producing, creating, they have funding, and the artists don't, by and
Hello.
large. So the ones who have funding should be able to pay. So that's the idea of the model. And so, yeah, we've been designing it and beta testing it. We have about a little under 350 members so far. We've got mostly artists who are in LA, but also here, a growing number here in the Bay Area.
This
And
is the pitch, Bay Area.
and
Get in there. Get in there.
150 active monthly users. And yeah, for in the arts and so in the commercial end, I saw a need to help deconstruct that, in my opinion, exploitative model. But in the arts and cultural side of things, in the world where a lot of us live in, it's an access issue, and it still is an issue. Where it's an issue of, by and large, there's a few open auditions. I know, Andrea, you're involved in some, which I think is really exciting.
Yes.
But definitely in LA, by and large, there's not a lot of open auditions for dancers or for actors. And so if you want to work, you have to know someone, or you have to have an in, because a lot of the choreographers, directors are not auditioning. They are selecting, either they're teaching and they're selecting students, or they are talking to each other and networking with each other and talking to each other about what dance is really hot right now, or they go to the show and see someone say, "Ooh, I'd like to work with them." And if you're not in those spaces, in those rooms, in those conversations, you might not even know those companies exist, those opportunities exist, right?
You preaching to the choir.
Okay, you got him. Yeah, much less be able to
Come on.
have access. And seeing that from the other side, that to me, in general, that was, I think, not a very uh, morally justifiable way to exist as an ecosystem that has a mission of supporting and centering artists, which so many of us in this ecosystem do. But beyond that, it also wasn't a very efficient way to run a business model or or an ecosystem either, because just from a straight like economic perspective, it's what they call opportunity cost. You're missing out on so much potential, potentially amazing artists that you may not discover because you are not taking the time to look and find them, which then also then reinforces the equity issue. Because
Oh,
by and
don't even get
large,
started. Don't even get started with equity.
our people,
We could be here all day.
we could be here all day. We probably will if I keep going with that. But in a nutshell, yeah, it's doesn't surprise me that progress has not been made, or that really the backsliding is always a risk when those networks are never expanded. Then yeah, those that are marginalized are never going to get in access if you don't open it up. So all of this, there's we're not pretending to offer any seismic solutions, but what I am able to offer is space and a platform that was developed and built with blood and sweat and a lot of care, with artists, and particularly artists who haven't had access, who aren't in the cool club, who don't get all the funding, who don't get all the touring, who don't get all the gigs, in mind. And so we'll see how it goes. And also for me, it's a joyful experience because we have a board of artists and arts administrator leaders, which is unique. And we are also not a nonprofit; we're a for-profit, which we say proudly because we believe that artists, especially marginalized artists, should be paid for their work, and the work that we do is valuable. And we are in a society, we're in an ownership society that values capitalism and that values the idea of making profit. And what you then choose to do with the profit, in my opinion, is an expression of your value, your personal values. So just the act of generating profit itself, in my opinion, is not necessarily something to be demeaned or something for artists to run away from, but rather to be embraced, because with that profit, you can make a really positive impact. You can do a lot for your community, and you can put a lot of good in the world if you choose to do that. It's people that choose to use profit to exploit or to put down or marginalize communities, that often get a lot of the attention. and kind of spoil it for the rest of us, in my opinion. And so that's my perspective. Now, other people prefer the nonprofit model because they feel like it is more moral to be a nonprofit. And you're also speaking to somebody, we haven't talked about it a lot, but I have a day job. I run a nonprofit dance company. So I see the value of nonprofit, and I very
Mm-hmm.
much see the amount of good that that sector can do. And I'm very grateful to have built a career in the nonprofit sector. But I also see a lot of good that for-profit
Mm-hmm.
sector can do. And so that's why we made the choice for Artist Magnet to be a for-profit company. But what that means in terms of those of us who are together working on it is that our board members are not like nonprofit board members. Our board members are shareholders. And so our board members have a stake in investment in the growth of the company, and they're rewarded and supported for investing in the company and in that growth. And also it means that we don't need to do like chicken dinner fundraisers every quarter of months from the nonprofit board, or we don't have to worry about competing with each other for scarce resources or funding and say, oh, well,
Mm-hmm.
get me on the board because you're fundraising for your own nonprofit and I have this other nonprofit. Instead we need to have like bankers on our board. We can be artists and be on the
Mm-hmm.
board together and share resources and support each other and share grants with each other and share career opportunities with each other. And that is an environment that I really thrive in, and that just makes me want to go to a board meeting. And so yeah, I'm really excited about what we're doing at Artist Magnet. And thank you for letting me do a pitch, Andrea.
Yes, absolutely. As a board member, for those who don't know, as a board member, yes, I wanted to make sure that David got a chance to share with all of you exactly what it's like to be on a board for a for profit and also for a nonprofit. He has lots of experience. Now, David, if you can tell the audience where they can find Artist Magnet.
Yes, so you can find it online at artistmagnet.com. The site is responsive, which is great. What that means is it works really great on a phone as well as on a laptop or desktop. And so you can look it up on the phone. We also are building two apps. We're building an Android app and a Apple app, and those are harder to build than it sounds. And so we've been spending the past year developing the app, but we're making a lot of great progress, and we're going to be launching that this year. So look out for that. And we're on social media, so at Artist Magnet, and we're all over the place on all of the fun social medias.
Thank you so much, David. It's been fantastic chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for the opportunity. It's been a joy. Take care.
Thanks, all of you out there listening and supporting another season. Please be sure to leave a review in Apple Podcasts or in the comments of our social media pages. We want to hear from you. This has been another episode of The Black Landscape, where Black excellence is always trending.